Sir.
Thank you.
So you'll see that Jim, President and CEO of the Cosmosphere, will go first. He'll introduce you. You'll give your remarks, and then you'll introduce the Administrator Bernstein, who will give his remarks.
And in my mind, my remarks.
Yeah, good morning, Senator. Your mic is live. Oh, now it's muted.
Now it's live.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to get started in 1 minute. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for the Engaging the Artemis Generation virtual Q&A event. As a reminder, this event is being recorded and all participants have been muted. We'd ask that you turn off your video feeds if you are a participant. To enhance your virtual experience, we recommend you pin the speakers in place. To do this, click the ellipsis that appear beside the speaker's name, then choose Pin from the drop-down menu. Now their feed should remain stationary. With that, I will turn it over to the President and CEO of the Cosmosphere, Mr. Jim Remar.
Good morning. I'm Jim Remar, coming to you from the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson, Kansas, where we house and display the largest combined collection of U.S. and Soviet era artifacts in the world. Not only do we have the significant collection of Soviet and U.S. artifacts, we also have an outstanding range of summer camp experiences for students second grade through high school. And today I am joined by some of our campers from Merits in Space, which is a camp just for scouts, and also joining me are campers from our Mission Lunar Trek Camp. They're experiencing a simulated Artemis-style mission this week, complete with a lunar landing. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to say how proud the Cosmosphere is of our affiliation. We share a mission to not only inspire the next generation of space, but also to remind visitors from across the country and around the world of the significance of our nation's place in the space race. The qualities and skills it took to get us to the moon once are the same that will enable us to return. Teamwork, critical thinking, resiliency were critical qualities in the first space race and space mission. They're critical today and will certainly be in the future. It's an honor to have these panelists who embody all that and more, who happen to all be from Kansas and each have ties to the Cosmosphere. We're eager to hear their stories. Colonel Nick Hague grew up in Hoxie, Kansas. He first visited the Cosmosphere in junior high. We hope it helped him inspire him as he went on to the United States Air Force Academy, where he received his Bachelor's of Science in Aeronautical Engineering, and then MIT, where his master's degree in 2000 was in Aeronautical and Astronautical Engineering. In 1998, Colonel Hague was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force. In August of 2000, he was assigned to Kirtland Air Force Base, Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he worked on advanced spacecraft technologies. In late 2004, he deployed for 5 months to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, conducting experimental airborne reconnaissance. In June of 2013, he was selected one of 8 members of the 21st NASA astronaut class. Nick was the first astronaut from his class to be assigned to a mission, which launched on October 11, 2018. Unfortunately, he and his crewmate, Alexei Ovechkin, of the Russian space agency Roscosmos, were forced to abort the mission when a rocket booster experienced malfunction shortly after the launch of their Soyuz MS-10. The aborted spacecraft landed safely. Nick relaunched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan to the International Space Station March 14, 2019. Together with fellow astronaut Christina Koch and the international crew of expeditions 59 and 60, they conducted or participated in hundreds of experiments in biology, biotechnology, physical science, earth science, including investigations into devices that mimic the structures and function of human organs, free-flying robots, and an instrument to measure Earth's distribution of carbon dioxide. During his mission, Nick conducted 3 spacewalks, which totaled 19 hours and 56 minutes, and spent a total of 203 days in space. Welcome, Colonel Haig. Teresa Sindelar was born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, go Big Red. She then moved to Kansas, where she earned a graduate degree in education with an emphasis in curriculum and instruction through Wichita State University. Teresa and her family moved to Texas about 10 years ago. Her first position with NASA was a NASA education specialist in the Teaching from Space office at the Lyndon Johnson Space Center in Houston. Currently, Teresa works at KBR as a medical operation crew instructor. She trains astronauts in environmental health operations and emergency response to better understand how to anticipate and avoid hazards and how to respond if there is a hazard. Her days are spent teaching classes, developing and writing curriculum for training classes, and serving as an instructor for simulations conducted in the Space Vehicle Mock-Up facility at JSC. Welcome back to the Cosmosphere, Teresa. Carlos Charlie Garcia is the propulsion and vehicle engineer at Agile Space Industries, where he develops new rocket engines using 3D printing technologies to produce previously impossible designs. Before Agile Space Industries, Charlie worked on the launch engineering team at SpaceX, Cape Canaveral, leading second stage integration. Charlie has a bachelor's degree in aeronautics and astronautics from MIT. While he was a student at MIT, Charlie was the president of the rocket team, guiding and growing it as it launched sounding rockets from the Mojave Desert under FAA aerospace waivers. Charlie designed and built the solid rocket motors that propelled those rockets over 20 Gs up to Mach 3. Charlie also built and tested a Hall effect ion engine and a small biopropellant liquid rocket engine during his time at MIT. As Charlie says, he grew up in the shadows of the Cosmosphere International Science Education Center. He attended camps here from 2nd grade through high school. Charlie completed his Eagle Scout project at the Cosmosphere, building an exhibit with hands-on learning experiences about driving Mars rovers. Charlie also worked as a summer camp counselor at the Cosmosphere for 3 years. He still loves sharing his passion for space exploration with others by running social media outreach. Charlie is 24 years old and lives in beautiful Durango, Colorado. Charlie, the Cosmosphere is very proud of all you have accomplished. In addition to having proud ties to our 3 outstanding panelists, the Cosmosphere is fortunate to be represented by a United States Senator who understands that some of the best STEM education in the country happens in the heartland. U.S. Senator Jerry Moran, a virtual welcome to the Cosmosphere. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much. And to all of the panelists, thank you for allowing me to join you. I feel honored to be in this group, perhaps the outcast. You all have done amazing things, important to the country with your lives. And I'll try to role model myself after your conduct, your behavior, and your careers. But it is an opportunity for me to congratulate and commend the Cosmosphere and the people in Hutchinson and South Central Kansas, who a long time ago discovered that there was lots of opportunity to capture young men and women, adults, Kansans, and really people across the country and around the globe with the value of space exploration and science and mathematics and engineering and research. I have a goal as a United States Senator to help my state create opportunities for people like Charlie and others that have an interest, a desire to pursue science and mathematics, research and engineering in their lives, and to make sure that we have great opportunities. And to those who haven't ever thought about this kind of career or interest, to create opportunities as the Cosmosphere does, as space exploration does, as landing on the moon does, create an excitement in people to have this thought that maybe when I grow up, I can become an astronaut, or I can become a scientist, or I can help astronauts explore space. And I'm delighted to be a small part of that effort. And I'm pleased that you're all here, and I'm glad that there are so many connections to Kansas in this opportunity to gather. I thank the Cosmosphere for hosting and for their continued dedication for inspiring another generation of space explorers. I thank Administrator Bridenstine for moderating, and today's panelist, the astronaut Nick Hague. Nick and I, he's significantly younger than I am, but we grew up in towns very similar one to another. And it's always pleasing to me to see any Kansan, but certainly anyone from a small town, have the opportunities that Nick has had, the responsibilities and opportunities that he has taken to become the astronaut that he is, and so important to our country and its future. And Teresa and Charlie, thank you very much for being role models and teachers and educators in a way that I hope inspires everyone in the mission that the Cosmosphere, NASA, that Nick Hague and I are about in trying to create an opportunity for America to be the country that is so good at exploring space and creating opportunities for Americans to experience the world, the globe, and even outer space. 50 years ago, it was that we put a man on the moon. As we turn to Artemis and future missions, it will take new and dedicated teams of engineers and scientists, mathematicians, teachers to achieve our nation's new goal of space exploration. As I said, each panelist here has a Kansas tie, perhaps with one exception, but I'll try to give Jim Bridenstine a Kansas connection before this is over. And I'm pleased that the students in our audience, many, if not most, maybe even all, are Kansans as well. Let me turn it over to Administrator Bridenstine. He has to be polite to me. He'll say something nice about me because I appropriate the money that NASA is able to spend, taxpayer dollars, on space exploration and the NASA missions. But I would say in all sincerity that Jim Bridenstine has been an outstanding administrator of NASA. I'm pleased to see somebody from a neighboring state, though not quite a Kansan, in this significant capacity. And he will tell you, I'm quite certain, that the Cosmosphere was an inspiration to him in his life. And I can't imagine, maybe everybody on this panel has the dream job that they have wanted their whole lives. I know Jim Bridenstine does. And I thank him for his leadership at NASA and look forward to our continued efforts to make sure that space exploration and science is something that is honored and esteemed in the United States, and certainly in the Midwest where we all come from. So pleased to be with you, and I'm looking forward to the conversations and looking forward to the questions from our participants. So thanks everybody for doing this. And Nick, especially thank you, astronaut that you are. You have significant responsibilities, but you've told me from the first time we met that any way that we can help inspire young Kansans to pursue the kind of career that you've pursued, you'd be all in. And you've been very kind in that, and I'm very grateful to you. And I know that we have some folks from Hoxie who are paying attention today, and your hometown newspaper, The Sentinel, is covering our conversation today. Good to be with you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Senator Moran, and thank you for those amazingly kind words. And the feeling is mutual. Yes, I do have to say nice things about you because you're the appropriator that funds NASA, but it is also true that I would say those things even if you weren't in that position, because it really is true. You are a leader on these space issues, and we are so grateful for that leadership. And as we seek to go back to the moon under the program that you just mentioned called Artemis, we have big things in front of us. And of course, I'll share with you two things that I want to hit off the bat. Number one, I grew up in Arlington, Texas, As a young man, up until 10th grade, I lived in Arlington, Texas. And every summer we would travel up to South Dakota, Mobridge, South Dakota, which was the hometown of both my mom and my dad. And along that trip, every year we had to stop at this little place that we just loved called the Cosmosphere. And every year we went and we learned more and had a wonderful time, always a great experience. And of course, the Cosmosphere. So it is a place that is near and dear to me and my family. And of course, I would argue that it has a lot to do with my future career, which was to eventually become a naval aviator, and then now the NASA administrator. So the Cosmosphere has a really big impact on the lives of children, not the least of which is on the life of me. So thank you to the Cosmosphere for hosting this. And I saw all of those Boy Scouts. And I want to just say, I too, I am an Eagle Scout. And I know, Charlie, you're an Eagle Scout. This is important. I want to be really clear about how important it is to me. Every job I've ever had, the number one thing that you'll find on my resume is Eagle Scout. It is always the first item listed. And that is true when I was even running for the United States Congress. My very first radio ad was, "My name is Jim Bridenstine. I'm running for the United States Congress, and I'm an Eagle Scout." It is important to me to make sure people know that about me. And I will tell you, when I was nominated to be the NASA administrator, I had to put together a resume and send it to all of those senators who eventually confirmed me, Senator Moran being among them. And the number one item I had on my resume, the very top line, was Eagle Scout. So I say that because I want to encourage all of those young folks that are there to finish, to get your Eagle Scout. And ultimately, as you go through life, think about the things that you learned in scouting and apply those to your lives every day. So with that, you can probably see my background. The thing behind me is actually not on the moon at all. This is called Jezero Crater, and it is in fact on Mars. And in 9 days, we are 9 days away from launching a robot to Mars. And this time when we launch the robot to Mars, it's also going to include a helicopter. And this is the 9th time in human history that we've sent a robot to Mars, and we're going to be successful here. I'm knocking on wood as I say that. But this time when we go, we have a very different mission. It is now an astrobiology mission. We are looking for signs of life. This crater that is behind me was at one time in its history a lake bed. And you can see over my shoulder over here, you're going to lose my hand here, but you can see over my shoulder. In fact, let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. This is that part of the crater. You can see this is the crater wall, and here you can see a river that flows into the crater, and coming from the river, you can see a delta. This delta looks a lot like the deltas that we have here on Earth. In other words, we know, not just based on this image, but based on rovers that we've already sent to Mars, namely Spirit and Opportunity. We know that Mars was at one time covered in water. In fact, the northern hemisphere of Mars was 2/3 covered by an ocean. And what do we know about water on Earth? Wherever it exists, there's life. Is that true on another world? We don't know. But 2/3 of Mars was covered in ocean. It had a magnetosphere that protected it from the radiation of deep space. And in fact, it had a very thick atmosphere, much like the atmosphere of Earth. At one time, Mars was habitable. Is it habitable today? We don't know, but we need to go find out. Certainly on the surface, it's very, very doubtful that it would be habitable. But we've learned these things from rovers of the past. Curiosity rover showed us that Mars is covered in what we call complex organic compounds. The building blocks for life exist all over Mars. They don't exist on the moon at all, but they're all over Mars. We know that the methane cycles of Mars match the seasons of Mars, which is another indicator. The probability of finding life on another world keeps going up. And now we have found that there is liquid water, even right now, today, there is liquid water 12 kilometers under the surface of Mars. And again, what do we know about water on Earth? Wherever it exists, there is life. Is there life on Mars? Has there been life in the past? We don't know, but we need to go find out. So what we're looking for is signatures of ancient life. And we're going to launch that mission 9 days from today. We're going to launch to Mars with a robot and, for the first time in history, a helicopter. So we can actually do a technology demonstrator to do a scout mission ahead of time, ahead of where the rover, where we might want to send the rover. So this is a very exciting time at the agency. But what are we doing with humans right now? Rovers and robots and deep space probes, these are all really important parts of what NASA does. But right now, as the senator said, we're going back to the moon under a program we call Artemis. A lot of us are familiar with Apollo. Apollo was that moment in American history where we landed on the moon for the first time ever, and we loved the Apollo program. Well, it just so happens that in Greek mythology, Apollo had a twin sister, and her name was Artemis, and she was the goddess of the moon. And this time when we go to the moon, we get to go with all of America. Today we have this very diverse, highly qualified astronaut corps that includes women, which back in the 1960s we did not have that. So today we're going back to the moon. We're going sustainably. In other words, we're going to stay. We're going to learn how to live and work on another world for long periods of time. Here's another amazing discovery on the moon. We found back about 10 years ago, we found hundreds of millions of tons of water ice on the south pole of the moon. Water ice it represents life support. H2O, O is oxygen, so it can be used for oxygen to breathe. H2O is water. It's water to drink. And of course, the hydrogen in the H2O, hydrogen is rocket fuel. It's the same rocket fuel that powered the space shuttles. It's the same rocket fuel that one day it may power Nick Hague, our astronaut with us here today, to fly all the way to the moon. So think about the moon as a place to learn how to live and work for long periods of time using the resources of the moon. And we build an architecture that as much as possible is replicable for Mars. So we call the program Moon to Mars. The first phase of it is the Artemis program, a sustainable return to the moon. In other words, we're going to stay. And we're putting together the broadest international coalition that our agency has ever had to deliver on the sustainable return to the moon while we're building the architecture to go all the way to Mars. So we're going with commercial partners, many of which are there in Kansas. We're going with international partners. We're going sustainably, and then ultimately, we're going to go to Mars. And of course, we're just very grateful to have the support of a key person who is responsible for helping us put all this together from a financial perspective. And that just so happens to be the senator from the great state of Kansas, Senator Moran. So it's an honor to be here with you at the Cosmosphere. And it's also an honor for me to get to introduce to you somebody who I consider a friend, somebody who I was with in Kazakhstan at the Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan when he did in fact abort a launch. He was, I don't know, Nick, you were probably 50 miles in the sky, and all of a sudden I heard the Russian interpreter tell me that you were experiencing 0G. And I thought that was a little odd. And then I heard the interpreter say that you're experiencing 6G. And I said, that's really not right. And then everybody got out of the room. Everybody ran out of the room speaking Russian. And I was left wondering what's going on. It took a little time and a little interpretation, but I will tell you for about 5 or 10 minutes there, I was very concerned about you, Nick. So glad that you made it home. And I want the whole audience here to know that when he made it home, the first thing he said to me is, he said, well, that just happened. I guess I'm going to have to go again soon. So talk about a brave American, a proud Kansan. Nick, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, sir, for the introduction. Yeah, I can be reasonably confident that that was not what you were expecting for your first inaugural, launch of a crew to the station under your administration. So I think you got to meet my better half in a much more stressing and intimate environment, and Katie is grateful for the support that the team provided that day. Surely it was not what we expected. I also want to thank the senator making good on a promise, getting me an opportunity to talk to Kansans, to talk to kids, and get them excited about what we're doing in space and the opportunities that are out there for them to seize. So the Cosmosphere is truly a special place. It influenced me as I was growing up, and a little over a year ago, I was able to do a space to ground a connection with them. And there's no better way to be able to give your mom a happy Mother's Day greeting than on live video from the space station. So I'm eternally grateful. I'm never going to be able to top that Mother's Day gift. But what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about my experience on the space station, my time for Expedition 59 and 60, show you a video and try to help everybody that's watching understand what does it mean to live and work in space. And so we're going to roll a 5-6 minute video here. So back in March of 2019, the culmination of a childhood dream, I'm climbing the stairs again to a Soyuz rocket in the Baikonur Cosmodrome with my crewmates, Christina Cook and Alexei Ovchinin, and we're riding that rocket to space and feeling the rumble and enjoying every second of the 9 minutes that it takes to get to low Earth orbit. And then when you get there, everything floats. And then finally, for the first time, seeing the space station with your own eyes and coming through that hatch and realizing that you've arrived and looking out and seeing that first glimpse of the Earth. And almost immediately, you start trying to adapt. You start trying to figure out, okay, so how do I eat in space? How do I float in space? How do I fly in space? Football is a different game up there. And so you're adjusting immediately. And, there's lots of fun and games. But you're starting to explore this unique environment. The whole reason we're there on the space station is to take advantage of 0G, where you can play with water back and forth. But you have to counteract those effects of 0G. And so you get right to it. You have to work out a lot. And Teresa's going to talk about some of the hazards of the space environment. But the first one is just you've got to use your muscles, otherwise they waste away. And so we've been living and working on the space station continually for 20 years now. And so we've figured it out. We figured out how to try to address all those negative impacts. And so while you're trying to learn how to live, the work is nonstop, and it starts immediately. It starts with reaching out and grabbing a cargo vehicle full of supplies with the robotic arm. And that cargo vehicle, it's one person reaching out and grabbing it with a robotic arm, but it represents so much more because it's full of experiments that the team has sent up from the ground. It's full of supplies. And so the one thing I'm going to impress upon you now, and I'll repeat it as I talk to you, is that it takes a gigantic team to work and live in space. And there's no better example of that than doing a spacewalk. And I got to do a few of them up there. And you're out there and you're in your own spacesuit, your own spacecraft, and you're floating around and working in one of the best offices that can exist. But you're not alone. You're connected with that entire team that's on the ground. The specialists that are supporting you real time, or the trainers that you spent hundreds of hours training with so that you do everything right. And that's how you make impossible things possible. It's through that teamwork. So the primary mission for the space station is the pursuit of knowledge, to try to exploit this zero gravity environment. And so we do all kinds of research up there. We grow plants and bacteria, and we sequence DNA, and we're trying to push the boundaries of what we understand so that we understand them better, and we can, you know, maybe find a better therapy to address some disease, or we're testing out new technologies that are going to help us as we go back to the moon and push deeper into space. We also open up space to countries around the world through small little CubeSats. And one of the most fun things to do while you're up there is share that experience real time with people on the ground. And so, like I mentioned before, being able to talk to the Cosmosphere was a thrill. The thing that is most difficult to share, though, is that perspective. You know, what is it like when you look out the window and you see these gigantic swaths of the earth underneath you, little atolls in the middle of a vast ocean, the brilliant colors as you fly over the Bahamas, vast swaths of deforestation in South America, or a gigantic hurricane, Hurricane Dorian, as it forms right underneath you. That perspective is something that is so impactful. And I could spend years up there staring out and trying to enjoy that view and really absorb it. But eventually that mission, you know, comes to an end and you have to prepare to come home. And so I had the opportunity to land. You'll notice the crew I launched with is not the crew that I landed with. And Alexei and Hazza Al-Mansuri, the first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates, and I landed in the steppes of Kazakhstan. And there's this change in perspective. You know, you land in the middle of Kazakhstan and they hand you a satellite phone, and then you're able to call your family. And so I'm talking to my wife and I say, honey, I'm home, because I feel like I'm home, even though I'm on the opposite side of the earth, because that experience does change your perspective. And so the obvious question is, what's next after something like that? And the answer is, we're looking forward. We're looking to go to the moon, the Artemis program. We're going to continue to use that program to open humanity's eyes and to discover new things and ultimately make life better and more rich for everyone on the ground. So if we can, I'm going to show you this photo. I was able to snap this photo out the cupola, the bottom of the space station, and I'm hoping that a few of you out there might be able to pick out some of the geography, but this is most of Kansas. So in the center at the bottom is Wichita, and we'll get the cursor hovering over Wichita if we can. And then you can look and you can see Kansas City up in the upper right-hand corner. And so the thing that impresses you first is that you don't see boundaries. Space has this amazing ability to eliminate boundaries and bring us together. Discovery can do that, whether it's just within the United States or whether it's across the entire globe. Boundaries dissolve, and that common pursuit of knowledge really draws us together. And so understand that those boundaries disappear, those differences disappear once you get out there into space. The other thing I want you to realize is that you're on this photo. We're all connected on this globe. And if you look at the cursor in the lower left-hand corner, you know, that's roughly over the top of my hometown of Hoxie. And, you know, that's where my journey started. And so we all have an important role to play on this island we call Earth in the middle of space. And my challenge to you is that you let your dreams and your passions fuel you and propel you through life. And understand that even though you may come from Kansas, and even though you may have grown up in a town of less than 1,000 people, your dreams can be a reality. And so use that passion. And if anything today, I hope that you are exposed to opportunities to pursue those passions as we take this giant leap to the moon and onto Mars. And understand that it's this gigantic team that we need, and we need people from all different backgrounds and different perspectives, and we need you to come together to help us make us stronger. We need the support to push us forward. We need the participation to push us forward. And I just want you to know those opportunities are within reach for everyone that's tuning in today. So, with that, I'll turn it over to the panel. Before Teresa starts, I just want to say it takes a team, and Teresa taught me everything I need to know about how to get out of a really tight situation up there. So she was part of my training team and prepared me for those moments when we hope they never happen, but when they do, you know that you're armed with all the skills you need to make it through safely. So, Teresa, I'll turn it over to you. I've got you on mute.
See, we have to learn things at NASA too. I'm so excited to be part of this. Thank you, Nick. And I will echo what the administrator said, that at that moment when Nick and Alexi aborted, we were all holding our breath. But if you listen to the comm, Nick and Alexi are so cool and calm and collected, and they're just doing their thing. So we're glad that you got up there and came back and then did some more training and then went up there again. So thanks so much. So my name's Teresa, and I work in the medical operations side of the NASA world. And what that means is that I'm part of the training team. So Nick just talked to you guys about what it is like to be up there and how to do all of the operations on board. But the piece that I am part of is everything that happens ahead of time. So all of the things that we do to prepare our astronauts to go and be happy and healthy and do the amazing science and all of the wonderful experiments that they do on board. So I thought I'd just kind of quickly tell you my story and then show you the good stuff, which is what I actually do all day, every day. So next slide, please. So as Jim Remar mentioned, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and when I was about 7 years old, I told my parents that I was going to work at NASA and I was going to live in Houston, and if they wanted to come along for the ride, that was fine, but that was where I was going to be. And I got bit by the space bug very early in life. One of the most beautiful things about the Midwest is a big open sky, especially at on a clear, dark night when you can just see the stars until infinity, and that hooked me right away. And I was fortunate enough to meet someone just by chance. His name is General Tom Stafford. He happened to be signing autographs in a jewelry store in Omaha, Nebraska on a very cold winter evening. And I just was beside myself. My mom and I waited in line, and he signed a picture for me. And he told me that, hey, you know, if you're interested in space, there is this really great place called the Cosmosphere, and you should go there. And, you know, they have camp programs and they have all of this great stuff, and you should just totally go. And my mom was like, okay, yeah, whatever. And I was like, Mom, please, 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 please. And after about 6 months of begging, I saved my own money and I got to go to the Cosmosphere camp. So that picture on the top of the screen is me in the very first generation of the Falcon shuttle simulator. And I was the commander, of course. And I went to camp and I just had so much fun. My parents thought I was going to just be homesick and miserable. And I just was like, bye, see you later. And so after that, I went to the University of Nebraska. My undergraduate degree is in geology. And then I actually moved to Hutchinson, Kansas, where my husband and I lived right after we got married. And I was a full-time employee at the Cosmosphere. I ran their camp programs, which was so much fun. While I was there, I earned my master's degree at Wichita State University. And actually, 2 of my children were born in Hutchinson. So when it was time to leave the Cosmosphere, it was a super bittersweet moment. I was so happy to be going and living and working in Houston and doing what I wanted to do, but it was really hard to leave the cause and all of the wonderful things at the cause and all of the great people. But eventually I did go and I moved. You can hit the next slide, please. I moved from Omaha and Hutchinson, and then I made it all the way down to Friendswood, Texas, which is just outside of Houston. We're kind of between Houston and Galveston. And one of the things that I took with me that was really important was that picture that General Stafford had signed for me way back in the day. And it still sits on my desk to this day at JSC. Next slide, please. And I started off in NASA's Office of Education, and I always kind of kept my eye on. I felt like my passion had always been some hybrid of teaching and some hybrid of science. I also, when I lived in Hutchinson, I was also a science teacher. So any Bueller Crusaders that are out there, here's your shout out. Go BHA. It's a great day to be a Crusader. But I knew that my passion was somewhere. I wanted to be a teacher. I've always been a teacher. And so I decided that I was going to pursue a job in crew training. I really felt like that was going to be my niche. So I moved over to the Space Medicine Operations Division. And to be clear, I am not a medical personnel. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm a teacher. And but this group actually has a lot of insight into how we deal with the environment, which as a science teacher, that is pretty much what I did. So I thought what I would do is I would just walk you through some of our training events as we train the crew. So next slide. So the first thing you have to realize, and you'll hear people at NASA say this a lot, is it's not just one person, it's a team. And this next picture is a picture of my team and the crew members that we began training. This was my first crew that I ever trained. And the crew members themselves do graciously take some time to take pictures with us, which we all like. But the idea is that you are one of many inside your group, and then that group is one of many inside the broader team of instructors. So this is me. We have Bob, who's holding the sign. He is our exercise countermeasures trainer. And then there's me in the black in the middle, and then the two women beside me, that's Penny and Melinda, and they are nurses, and they train the crew members on how to do the medical responses, how to put in stitches and give injections and start IVs and all of that good stuff. And so this is my group. And then the next slide, you will see that we have a broader group that all of the instructors come together. So what typically happens is there is two kinds of training sessions that we have. We have what we call a routine operations, or what I kind of like to call like day in the life of training, like what it is that the crew members are going to do all day, every day. And then we have emergency training. So I'll talk about our day in the life training first. And we have this great building inside the Building 9 of the Johnson Space Center. It's called the Space Vehicle Mock-Up Facility. And it is essentially the space station size, shape, and orientation as close as we can get it, so that the astronauts can practice what it is they're going to do on a daily basis and their emergency response. And as you can see, this takes a whole team of instructors, just each coming with their own areas of expertise to help get the crew members through these events. And these events happen all the time. We're constantly training folks to get them up and running so that we can meet their launch dates. And this is something I think will be interesting for Artemis, is how are we going to do this differently? What is a day in the life training scenario going to look like for crew members who are going to go live on a moon base, or who are going to go drill into the surface of Mars? How do we train them for that here on the ground? So I have a feeling that Building 9 will get some new equipment, and we'll have to change the way that we do things. And we're going to need some people to help us out with that. So in day in the life training, next slide, please. My group, we talk about a whole bunch of things. Unfortunately, I don't have time to run through everything with you, but essentially we talk about medical training, we talk about exercise, we test the water, we test the surfaces, we test the air. We make sure that people have their hearing protected. We make sure that their overall health is okay. They get to talk to their doctors regularly. They also have what we call behavioral health. So folks on the ground who are trained psychologists make sure that the crew members are doing okay, that it can be isolating, it can be confining, and we want to make sure that they are happy and they're healthy and they're able to continue working on their experiments. Because the one thing that my group is different is that I don't have a system that I'm really worried about. I'm worried about the health of the crew member, and that's about it. So on the next slide, one of the big things that we talk about, and Nick mentioned this, was exercise. We have 3 pieces of equipment on board that we train the astronauts to use. One of them is, we call it CVIS. It's a bike, a stationary bike. The next one is a treadmill, and the treadmill is interesting because it has these specialized bungee cords, because if you take a step on the treadmill, you'll instantly float up and hit your head. So we need to have kind of an artificial gravity to bring the crew members back down and allow them to run on the treadmill. Those 2 give us what we call cardiovascular exercise, and that's exceptionally good for our crew members to keep them healthy. And then we also have, this is kind of a favorite among the crew members, it's called ARED. It's essentially like this really cool weightlifting machine. And it's basically, you have evacuated cylinders that provide resistance that allow the crew members to change the weight, if you will, without actually using weights. But it's called the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, called ARED. It's kind of a favorite, and it kind of looks like a transformer. Like, it changes from doing, you can do a deadlift to a squat to an overhead press to tricep dips. You can do all sorts of stuff with it. And so it's really an interesting piece of equipment, and it took some really smart people to come together and make that happen. Next thing that we worry about is the water. So on board, everything is recycled. And when I mean everything, I mean everything. So one of the crucial things that we have to do is we have to constantly test the water. And this is no different than you guys going out into the faucets at school, or going out into your backyard or into a creek and taking a water sample and testing to see what's in it. We pretty much do the exact same thing. And by testing the water, we make sure that the recycled water, which we can recycle urine, and we can recycle sweat, and we can recycle any sort of water that happens to be in the air. And we want to test that to make sure there's no bacteria, there's no fungus, there's no contaminants in there. And so the crew members do that all the time. Nick will tell you that that's probably the least favorite activity that the crew members do ever. But we still have to do it to make sure that it's safe for them to drink. The other thing that we do is we analyze the air and the surfaces. And I distinctly remember when I was in high school, one of the things that my biology teacher had us do, and those of you who have done this, you probably remember, is you're supposed to go around the school and you're supposed to swab all of the places that you think may be like really dirty. And then you come back to the classroom and you put them on a slide and you see what grows. We do the exact same thing on board the space station. We want to see if there's any bacteria or fungus on the surfaces, or if there's anything in the air that could potentially cause the crew members to have a health effect. So that's what we're really worried about there. The other thing that we obviously have been hearing a lot about lately is personal protective equipment. So my crew members are very careful in everything that they do, because you're in a closed environment. So because of that, you have to train the crew members to wear a mask and wear it properly. That is something that I do even before COVID-19 came along. We were teaching the crew members how to wear a mask. You can see that on the next slide. And they have gloves, and they have masks, and they have goggles, and they have these super cool like laser goggles that protect their eyes from any sort of UV radiation or lasers that would come in through the windows of the space station. And all of it is to protect the health of our crew members and make sure that when we are putting them in a situation of they're going to have to go into a new vehicle, or they're going to have to deal with something that maybe is a hazard, that maybe we wouldn't think it's a huge hazard down here on the ground, but up there it does have some potential to get out of control, then we would ask them to wear this personal protective equipment. As you can see, there's Paolo, and I can tell you for certain they do wear N95s on board the space station. So wear your mask is what I always tell my crew members. So that's kind of the day in the life stuff. That's the stuff that we do over and over and over again, so that they get so good at it. So then when they see it on their timeline up in space, then they go, oh yeah, I know how to do this. The next thing that we train the astronauts is the big emergencies. And I would love to be able to tell you, I have on the next slide, I have all of the emergencies that are listed, and I'd love to be able to go through all of the emergencies, each one, but I will say that there's a huge training team that comes together, and we work to make sure that our crew members know what to do in the event of an emergency. And I call them the big five. The big five are fire, depress, pneumonia release, a chemical hazardous release, and a medical emergency. I do have some pictures of all of those emergencies. However, we don't have time to go through them, so I'll just kind of go through the medical one, because that seems to be the one that we actually don't get to showcase as much as I would like. So on the next slide, so this is us getting ready to train our crew members, and so this is called a pre-brief. So pre-brief happens before we throw the crew members in. They know they are coming for an emergency training event. They don't know exactly what event is going to happen or when it's going to happen or how it's all going to play out, but they do have an understanding that they're coming for emergency training. And then it's just a matter of which cases we decide. Ahead of time, we all get together and our conniving minds come up with, okay, what can we train them with? What do they need to see? And what are some of the things that typically trip up our astronauts, and what is so incredibly crucial that they have to be able to do this in an instant? My husband's a volunteer firefighter, and one of the things that he always says to me is that when things get hot, your training really kicks in, and it just has to be automatic. And so that's our goal when we're training emergencies, is we want to make sure that the crew members immediately know what to do. So on the next slide, this is a scenario where we have given crew members a scenario in which a chemical has splashed into their eyes, and it has caused extreme burning and pain in their eyes. And all of this is simulated, of course. And they have to figure out how to go flush their eyes. So those of you who have ever been in a chemistry lab or a physical science lab, you always know where the eye wash station is in your school. Same thing happens here, except for it looks just a little bit different. But hopefully the picture will come up here in a second. But you can see that Alexi is on the left, and Mike Fink is on the other picture, and him and Chris Ferguson. So Alexi is actually he was Nick's buddy, and so he actually figured out a way to get that on, and he played. He messed with it enough to where it made these little squeaking sounds, and he actually played a little song, which I've never had happen before. And then Mike Fink and Chris Ferguson are actually the very first crew members that are going to fly on the new Boeing vehicle that is happening hopefully later this year. So that's one thing that we train them. They have to use medication for this, and they have to flush their eyes out until there is no longer a hazard to their eyes. And then the other major one that we do is a medical response. So on the next slide, you'll see that when we do a medical response, we have to simulate quite a few things. But one thing that is for sure is we have medical supplies on board the space station. And you can see Thomas here. Thomas is from the European Space Agency, and he's holding up the big things that we need in order to respond to a medical emergency. So you have your emergency medical treatment pack, you have another medical treatment pack that has medications in it, and then we have an AED, which it's very similar to the AEDs that we have down here on Earth, except for it's covered in like a Mylar tape to help protect it from the radiation. And what we do is we train the astronauts in first aid and CPR, and then a little bit extra. They get about roughly 15 hours worth of training to basically be the eyes and ears of the flight surgeons while they're on board. And we hope it never happens, but if they were to have to deal with a medical emergency, you can see on the next slide that we do train them how to respond. And next slide is our flight surgeons are actually talking as well to guide the crew members. Now, of course, you can see that this is a simulation because our crew member only has one leg and there's only part of the mannequin and there's no arms, but it gets the point across that the medical response needs to be quick and automatic, and our crew members do very well. And then after this, we have a debrief. Next slide. And in the debrief, it's a lot of times it's talking about what went really well. Sometimes it's talking about maybe things that didn't go so well or improvements that the crew members can make, but mostly it's a time for us to have a discussion of what do you think would happen in this scenario and how does it work? And the most important thing that we get out of it as trainers is crew members who have flown before. For example, in this picture, this is Peggy Whitson, who is probably one of the coolest female astronauts I've ever met. And she's been up there a lot, and she'll give us feedback and she'll say, well, things like this, it doesn't really work like that in space, or yeah, it's exactly like that, or maybe we need to change this procedure or tweak this here. And it's really an open discussion between the crew members and the instructors so that we can tell them what we're looking for and they can give us feedback on what actually works. And then we come together to make the training events better. And that's a really important piece. And then, of course, next slide, we always have time for pictures. And sometimes the pictures are serious and we pose. Sometimes they're silly. And sometimes you're part of amazing events. Like Nick was saying that we had 2 crew members from the United Arab Emirates that came, and that was the first time ever that they have ever trained or flown in space. So I think it's really important for us to just know that there's a lot of great things that are happening, and we're going to have to change things in training to make sure that we can meet those goals. And what I heard the administrator say was that Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo. And to me, that sounds like girl power. So I just want to give a plug out to all the ladies out there. We're going to need some really smart girls to come in here and be part of this team. And so don't ever think that just because, you're a kid from Kansas or I'm literally a kid from the cornfields. So there's a place for you. If there's a place for me, there's a place for you. So just please keep that in mind, and we'd love to have you. General Stafford told me when I met him, he said, find what you love, do it well, and there will be a place for you at NASA. And I believe that is true now, and I believe it will be true in the future. So I'm going to stop talking because I know our time is limited. So I think it's my turn to turn it over to Charlie.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. I think the audio should still be working. So if we start on the next slide. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlie Garcia. I was born and raised in Hutchinson, Kansas, where many of you are right now. And I was basically, like Jim said when he was introducing me, raised in the shadow of the Cosmosphere. One of my earliest memories is my grandfather holding me up so that I could touch the nose of the SR-71 Blackbird aircraft in the lobby of the Cosmosphere. And it made an impression, and I'd sort of known ever since then that I wanted to work on these amazing, incredible machines that explore space. And I wasn't always sure how I wanted to do that, but as I went through life growing up, it became clear to me that I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to help design and build and put together these machines that carry humans to the frontier and then beyond. And so I am probably closest to age to many of you listening in. So I will start by briefly talking about how I got to do the job that I get to do, which is opportunity I love. Every day I get to go into work. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I do because I have not been to space and I don't get to train astronauts every day, but I do get to make rocket engines, which is pretty fun. So I really so grateful to the Cosmosphere for providing me the opportunity to learn and be inspired about all of these things. I tell a lot of people that passion is something you cultivate, and the Cosmosphere provides a place for people like me and perhaps like you to cultivate that passion. So I worked hard in school, and I was able to go to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, where I got a bachelor's degree in aeronautics and astronautics. So that was an incredible opportunity. I met all kinds of amazing people while I was there, and I learned all kinds of amazing things. And that has enabled me to do some incredible jobs. Next slide, please. So while I was at MIT, I had the, sorry. Before we go on to that slide, I just want to briefly address this. When I was at the Cosmosphere camps, I had the opportunity to see some incredible rocket launches. And these are very meaningful to me personally. On one of the Cosmosphere camps, you get to go down to Florida. And I'd been down to Florida previously to see the last space shuttle launch. And this time when we went to Florida, I got to see the launch site of this new company called SpaceX. And it was very exciting what they were doing. I just remember the first time I walked into their hangar, they had this rocket laying on its side, kind of like the Russians do. And everyone had iPads, and they were tapping away, and they were putting the rocket together off of these iPads. And it was just so different from anything I'd seen before. And it made such an impression on me. I was so excited by the work they were doing. And little did I know that eventually I would have the opportunity to work on that rocket. And the next time people would fly from American soil would be on a rocket that I helped build, launched by SpaceX from Kennedy Space Center just a few months ago, actually. I'm so grateful for that opportunity to go and see a place that inspired me with the Cosmosphere and, then had such an impact on the rest of my life. Okay, now next slide, please. Yeah, so during my time at MIT, I worked on the launch engineering and manufacturing engineering teams at SpaceX. As a launch engineer at SpaceX, I helped with second stage integration and first stage refurbishment for flights CRS-11, one of those cargo resupply flights that Nick was talking about, carrying supplies up to the space station, and OTV-5, which is the last payload I helped integrate while I was a launch engineer. And then as a manufacturing engineer at the Hawthorne facility for SpaceX, I worked on second stage assembly, and I helped work through the processes and the designs and some of the testing that contributed to that first flight of American crews from US soil since the end of the space shuttle program. And now I'm at Agile Space Industries. Agile Space Industries is a new space company. It's a company that has a different philosophy towards spaceflight, where we're using new technologies to produce new rocket engines that are higher performance, and they're cheaper and they're faster to build. And they enable all kinds of new missions, such as, as part of the Artemis program, there's this thing called CLPS, the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, where NASA is, paying companies to supply material to the surface of the moon, kind of like they're doing for the space station, where companies send supplies to the space station. And so, they need new rocket engines that are capable of landing on the moon. And, we work on a variety of rocket engines that help support those goals. So I've gotten to do some incredible things in my life. And I really want to emphasize that the opportunities in the space industry come from a passion for the work you're doing and hard work, but there's kind of niches for all kinds of skills, biologists, teachers, fighter pilots, lots of engineers, but also people who are skilled with their hands, machinists, technicians, people who put stuff together, people who like taking things apart. I heard once on a tour of NASA that I think the only job they didn't have on the books at NASA was rock star. And then I think, since then, a rock star has gone and worked for JPL. So you never know what path will lead you into the space industry, but if you have a passion for it, you can certainly find a place. Next slide, please. So this is the test facility at Agile. We have this really cool test setup that allows us to test rocket engines in a vacuum, just like they see in space. And if you think about this, is really hard to achieve because the rocket engines pump out, pounds and pounds of gas per second that would tend to make any vacuum you tried to put on the rocket engine go away. So we've discovered a really clever way to keep the rocket engine in a vacuum so that we can test the rocket engine for minutes or even hours in the conditions that emulate as closely as possible what it'll see in space. And also this test site is basically on top of a plateau in the middle of beautiful Colorado. So the view outside of it is just spectacular. Great place to go to work. Unfortunately, we're working from home right now, but I look forward to going back into the office when it's safe to do so. Next slide, please. So I want to briefly talk about rocket engines, because now I've told you how I got the job that I got, starting in the Cosmosphere, going to college, getting a degree in aerospace engineering. What do I actually do is I build these rocket engines. So here are two rocket engines that we have here at Agile on the left and on the right. The one on the right, I believe, is our DS450. It's a 100-pound thruster. So, on the moon, that could lift 600 pounds of stuff. And then the one on the left, I don't actually remember which program. I think that might be, I don't know if I can say which program it is, but it's another cool rocket engine. These thrusters, we design them and then we build them and then we put them in the test stand and you can fire them as we see on the right. And there's all kinds of things you have to think about when you're building a rocket engine. And here at Agile, we've attempted to, this is what makes you really excited about it, is we build rocket engines quickly. Rocket programs used to take years. How long was it between the start of the Apollo program and the moon landing? It was, 9 years, something like that. But if you look at how we're doing Artemis, we're going back to the moon, not just to stay, but we're going back to the moon faster. The program was started, barely 4 years ago, and it's leveraging tools we've had before, but to support these faster, more innovative types of spaceflight, we have to find new ways of doing things. So if you go to the next slide, please. One of the ways we do that at Agile is we 3D print the rocket engines. So on the left, you can see a picture of one of our 3D printers in action. It's using a laser to scan the metal, and as it touches the metal, it melts it together and it creates a single piece. So instead of having to start with a large chunk of metal and having to cut and drill away parts of it to make the rocket engine, we can actually design the rocket engine such that it is a single piece that just prints up out of this metal powder, and then we can put it on the test stand. So if you look to the right, this is our DS45 thruster. So you can see that it's running this pulse thrust, and this is to demonstrate that the rocket engine is able to start and stop quickly so it can change directions and react if it was doing something challenging, like maybe approaching another satellite to rendezvous with it or landing on the moon. And it's made from an incredible exotic material called niobium. Niobium is really cool. You don't see it in this video here, but niobium is still strong even when it's glowing white hot. It's what they make the made the Apollo service module rocket engine extension out of. And so this means that you don't have to have as much cooling in the material. So this makes the engine more robust and able to survive higher temperatures. And it's cool tricks like this, using new materials that people in the Apollo program could have only dreamed of, and new manufacturing processes to make rocket engines in a single piece instead of in hundreds of pieces, that is going to enable us to do all the incredible things that lie in the future of space exploration. And this innovation is not just exciting for the capabilities it creates for the space program in our country. It's exciting and fun to be a part of, because every day when you go into work, you have a new challenge to solve, you have a new problem to work on, and you get to apply your skills and your brain to solve these challenges. And it's like building Legos without the instructions or something. It's so engaging to be solving these problems. Next slide, please. So I think this is where I have to pass it off to the Q&A. But before we do that, I just want to talk about this rocket. This is one of my favorite rocket engines I've ever built. I built this one back in college. This is a solid rocket motor. So instead of using liquid fuels, you cast this like rubber-like propellant and then you light it on fire. And this one has just a little bit of copper in it, which creates this beautiful blue flame. And it's some of my favorite rocket engine fire that I've ever seen. With that, I will pass it back to, I believe, Jim Remar and the administrator, who have some questions to ask the panel.
Thanks, Charlie, Nick, and Teresa. Appreciate it. We have some questions. The administrator and I are going to tag team this. I believe Senator Moran had to go vote. So Administrator Bridenstine and I will ask some questions. The first question comes to us from Cameron Williams, who's a freshman at Purdue University, and it is for the administrator. Administrator Bridenstine, is one of the goals of Artemis to establish a permanent presence on the moon, similar to the ISS, but on the lunar surface? Or will it be a more sustainable version of the Apollo program where we send astronauts to the moon for short periods of time?
So that's a good question. And the answer is it's a mix. So we have some advantages today that we didn't have in the Apollo program. One advantage is that we've got commercial partners. we just listened to Charlie Garcia talk about his time at SpaceX. And of course, we have partnered with SpaceX to not just resupply the International Space Station, but also now take our crew to the International Space Station. So when we go to the moon sustainably, which is the goal, absolutely, NASA, we want access to all parts of the moon anytime we want. Does that mean that we're always going to have NASA astronauts on the surface of the moon? No, it doesn't. But what it does mean is that at any time we need to get to any part of the moon, we're going to have access. The other thing is, because we have commercial partners and because we have international partners, of course, we're going to have presence on the moon from time to time. And those commercial partners and international partners will have presence on the moon from time to time. And if we do it right, the answer is yes, we will be able to have a permanent presence on the surface of the moon. And at the same time, we're going to be able to develop all of the capabilities and technologies that ultimately get us to Mars. So the answer is both. We want a permanent presence on the surface of the moon. NASA doesn't have all of the resources to achieve that permanently, but with commercial partners and international partners, it gets a lot more likely that we're going to be able to achieve that sooner. But our goal is very clear. We are going to the moon for a purpose, and that purpose is to land on Mars. That is the ultimate objective. We need to learn how to live and work on another world for long periods of time, and we need to take that knowledge to Mars. But while we're at the moon, we want to continue commercializing, continue to develop our international partnerships, and then all of us can do more when we work together.
Thank you, Administrator. I'm going to play the role of Senator Moran, so I'll be handling his questions. The next question comes to us from Nick Westerhouse, rising freshman, Blue Valley Northwest High in Overland Park, Kansas. This is for Nick Hague. It's two questions, Nick. What side effects did you experience after returning home from your space trips? And have you fully recovered from extended periods of time in microgravity? And if so, how long did it take?
Yeah, no, hi, Nick. I know you're out there watching. I remember taking you on a tour through Johnson Space Center, so I appreciate the question. So I'll answer the second question first, which is yes, I'm back to effectively 100%. Some things adapt really fast and some things take a little bit longer. One of those things that is, we showed all those pictures of exercise, 2.5 hours a day, every day of lifting weights and stressing yourself, your cardiovascular system. So 7 days after I landed, I took the same strength and physical fitness tests that I took before I launched, and I was at or better than the marks that I had before I launched. So the strength program is there, and it's really important, and we've spent the last 2 decades perfecting that. Some of the other stuff that goes away is, for instance, bone loss. There's just no substitute for loading your skeletal system and forcing the natural processes of bone generation, and so you lose bone mass on orbit. And so that's a slow process, and that takes months, upwards of a year to get back to where you were before, depending on how much you've lost. So I feel great. It's amazing. The one thing I took away from this mission is that even though I'm in my mid-40s, everything about me is completely adaptable to the environment that I put myself in. So the way you think, the way you navigate, the way your body responds, all of it changes. And you just don't anticipate that when you go up there. And there were things that were changing months into the mission where, after 4 months, I realized, I have just completely adapted to what's going on up here. So you're never too old to say that you're set in your ways. Anybody can change.
All right, so the next question is from Magaju, age 21, Hutchinson, Wichita State University. What is the most influential and this is for all of us. What was the most influential activity for your career that you did before college? So the question is before college. I would tell you from my perspective, there's a couple of things. Well, I'll really pin it down to one. The summer after my 5th grade year, the University of Texas at Arlington had basically a summer camp. It was a 1-week day camp, and they had a wind tunnel, and they allowed young folks to come in and learn about the theory of flight and who Bernoulli was, and what the Bernoulli theory of flight was. They had us play with an airfoil, which is basically a wing, and change the camber of the wing or the shape of the wing. Understanding if the wing is long and narrow or short and fat. How does it affect lift and drag and all of these things? That was a camp that I did the summer after my fifth grade year. And at that point, from that point forward, I knew that I was going to be involved in aviation of some kind. Shortly after that, a movie came out called Top Gun, which again had a huge influence on my life. And I knew that I want to be a pilot. I knew at that point, that's what I want to do. That looks so fun and engaging. Of course, in the movie, they don't tell you how hard it is. They just tell you how fun it is. But when you're in fifth grade or sixth grade, as it would be, as far as when the movie came out, these are the kind of things that had a huge impact on my life and were very inspirational. But I would say that summer camp after my fifth grade year, the wind tunnel experience was really fantastic. This is for all of us. So Nick and Charlie.
Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I can chime in. Before college, the thing that most influenced me was the process of getting into college and figuring out that going to the Air Force Academy and becoming part of the Air Force was something that I wanted to do. That idea of service, in service of something bigger than yourself. And in that process, getting into the Air Force Academy, that was the first of many doors that opened, that led to the opportunities that led me to where I am today.
So our next question comes to us from Andy, age 13, from Harmony Middle School in Overland Park, Kansas. And this is for Charlie. What do you have to do to make a good propulsion system?
That's a very poignant question because the answer depends on who's asking the question. So when you're designing a rocket engine, you have to analyze what you need the rocket engine to do, and we call it defining the requirements. So if the administrator here were to say NASA needs a new rocket engine for SLS, that would be a very different rocket engine than, say, if I had Elon Musk call me up and say SpaceX needs a new rocket engine. They use different fuels. The vehicles have to do different missions, and so the first thing you do is you outline what the requirements are. And actually, this has by far the largest impact on whether you have a good system or not, a good rocket engine, a good propulsion system or not, is how well you decide what the rocket engine needs to do. Because if you build a perfect rocket engine for landing on the moon and you try and use it to launch from Earth, the rocket won't even leave the ground because it won't produce enough thrust. So definitely, there's a lot of technical excellence you have to bring later in the design process, but those first steps of defining the requirements, I think, are the critical step in making an effective propulsion system.
Thank you,
Hey,
Charlie.
Charlie, I forgot to say that you need to make sure it doesn't blow up.
And Nick, I think you have a special appreciation for the importance of that.
Senator, welcome back. We'll let you jump in.
Jim, thank you. Sorry for the departure. I didn't get to hear everything that everybody said, but I had a couple of votes to cast on the Senate floor, and I've returned. Great to be here. I wanted to make sure that I showed Nick the flag. I don't know. Maybe there. The flag he gave me, a Kansas flag, after his return, and his comments in the card that came with the flag is ad astra per aspera, our state motto. Which is to the stars through difficulties. And what a perfect, certainly Nick Hague circumstance, but certainly all of us Kansans can use our state motto as we pursue the careers and interests that are represented by the conversation we're having today. And Administrator Bridenstine, I'm going to ask you the question. This comes from Andrew Swift, who is a sophomore at Cedarville University. Before I tell you that, I want folks to know that in addition to the aspect of exploring space, and particularly the astronaut aspect, we're working hard to make sure that Kansas Wichita, Kansas City, and the rest of our state are places in which people who want careers in engineering and science can find jobs in aerospace. And so in part of that effort, I was in Denver and visited ULA and visited Sierra Nevada last week. And I may join you at Cape Canaveral, Administrator, at the end of the month to see this rocket launch that you described in your remarks earlier. So I hope to see you in person shortly, but also a suggestion, an advertisement that we're also interested in creating businesses in Kansas, expanding businesses in Kansas that do business with NASA and involved in space exploration. Andrew Swift's question: what positions within the military or other background does NASA look at for potential astronauts for the moon and Mars, and what skills should they have? And maybe one of the first answers is Eagle Scout. But beyond that, Administrator, what would you tell Andrew you're looking for?
So number one, it used to be that all of our astronauts came from test pilot backgrounds. And so the way to become an astronaut would be to join the military, to become a pilot, to fly an airplane that had a greater than 1-to-1 thrust to weight ratio, which means it can actually accelerate in the vertical, those kind of things. And then become a test pilot. And if you had enough hours of flying tactical jets and you had the experience of being a test pilot, then you could become a NASA astronaut. So that was how it was, in the early days. But in today's environment, we're looking for a lot of diversity as far as backgrounds go. So we have biologists and we have medical doctors. We have, if you want to go into the military and you wanted to be a flight surgeon, for example, that could be actually a good foray into becoming an astronaut. Because when you go to the moon and you go onto Mars, as Nick and Teresa were talking about, you have to be able to perform medical services if necessary on those long journeys. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I will tell you, it is still true. It is still true that if you are a fighter pilot and you become a test pilot, and maybe not a fighter pilot these days, but just a pilot in the military, and you become a test pilot, there is a separate pipeline by which to become a NASA astronaut, because a lot of the flights that we do are first time ever flights. And NASA likes to have people that have experienced, how to fly things that have never flown before. And the test community is where that comes from. So if you look at Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, Doug Hurley is a test pilot from the United States Marine Corps. These are our two astronauts that just launched on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket that Charlie Garcia was just talking about. Bob Hurley was a test pilot in the United States Marine Corps, and Bob Behnken is a flight test engineer from the United States Air Force. And so because this was a first ever of its kind flight, we wanted test pilots on that mission. And that's going to be true whenever we do things of a first time. It's probably going to lean more towards the test community, which of course is where Nick also comes from. And in the future, though, after we get past the testing and we get more into operations, man, we want geologists. If we go to the moon and Mars, we're going to need geologists. We're going to need biologists. Remember what we're doing, the picture behind me. We're going to go try to find life on Mars. Again, I don't know that it's there, but if it is, we want to go find it. And so, there's a very broad array of ways to become a NASA astronaut these days. And as our missions grow, we're going to need more astronauts. And so there's going to be more opportunity than ever before.
Administrator, if I was on a selection committee to choose an astronaut, the first question I might ask after the Eagle Scout question is, how many times have you visited the Cosmosphere?
There you go.
And so let me just give a tip to the students out there. I'm not on a selection committee, although I would also add, if we can help any of the students who are interested in attending one of the military academies, you might think of the Air Force Academy. Others have pilots as well, but we do a selection process, and we've been doing it at the Cosmosphere highlight to the opportunities of space, and so make sure you take a look at our website and inquire of us how we can help you go to West Point or the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy and the others, the other military academies as well. Thanks very much.
Before we move on from the Senator Administrator, I'd like to highlight there are other routes into the space industry as well through the military. In my time working at SpaceX, one of the most important positions we had to fill was the role of technician, the people who actually put the rocket together. And we looked very heavily for airframe and power plant experience, people who had experience putting airplanes together. You don't necessarily have to go to college to, be in the aerospace industry, because these people that put the rocket together that have those technical hands-on skills are so essential to everything we do. And I would estimate there's probably many more of them than there are engineers even. And they're essential to making the space program function.
Absolutely. And from that perspective, running NASA, I'll tell you, one of the things, we need accountants. We need people that understand, we have a legislative affairs team that I know Senator Moran's team works with day in and day out to help his office understand what the needs of the agency are. So we need people that understand the politics. We need, as we look to doing new types of contracting, we need lawyers that can help us sort through those activities. And of course, none of this is worth doing if we can't communicate it to the public. So we have, a cadre of people that do communications in a really robust way. NASA is one of the best agencies in the world when it comes to communicating to the public about our discoveries. So, yeah, there's, look, you don't have to just be a scientist or an engineer to work at NASA. The preponderance of our activities are in science and engineering, but there's a lot of opportunity for anybody who's interested in space and aeronautics.
I think
I would just like to make one more plug while we can. We do have 2 astronauts who are active in the Corps who are former teachers as well. Joe Acaba and Ricky Arnold are former classroom teachers who applied and were successful and have flown multiple times in the astronaut corps.
Absolutely.
Yes, we've run out of time for questions for today's event. I'd like to turn it over to the administrator for some final remarks.
Well, sure. Well, I just want to thank everybody. Thank you to the Cosmosphere. Thank you to Senator Moran for putting this event together and hosting it. What an honor to be here, and I hope people have taken away some valuable insights that might affect your future. I'm going to stress from a NASA perspective. We have a big mission to go to the moon and to go with all of America, and of course we're doing it with an intent ultimately to go to Mars. That's our big objective, and there's lots of opportunities for everybody who watched today. If you're interested in aeronautics or space, work really, really hard. The question was, what does it take to be an astronaut? I'll tell you this, and this is true throughout all of life. And everybody on the panel today could tell you the exact same thing. What matters most is sustained superior performance. Whatever it is you're doing, make sure that you're doing it to the absolute best of your ability and sustain high performance. And if you do that, there will be no limit to what you can achieve or what you can do, either at NASA or wherever you choose to work. So with that, I just want to thank everybody and appreciate really you bringing this together and making a great event.
Thank you.